Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your host David, and while an election means that many members of Parliament must move on to new jobs, I remain to carry on the work of teaching you everything to do with Australian politics. You can't vote me away. I'm here forever. Speaking of getting rid of someone, today's episode is all about what happens to politicians when they leave Parliament. I'll go over the benefits they get, the benefits they don't get, but you think they do, and what kind of jobs they can go on to do afterwards. So let's start with the benefits. Imagine this, right? You're a member of Parliament, and you're hoping that on election day, the public will choose you instead of anyone else. And then the news comes in. There's a big swing against you, and you're suddenly unemployed and also having to make a speech live on ABC News about how incredibly unemployed you are at that moment. What happens next? Well, you get several $1,000s, of course. Basically, there's a thing called the Resettlement Allowance. It's a fund for the reskilling and re-employing assistance of members of Parliament who left involuntarily. Basically, that means they lost an election or the support of their party. It's money that helps them while they get a new job. If a member retires voluntarily, then they don't get it. So if they decide, I've had enough, I'm not going to run for re-election, then presumably they have had the forethought to start browsing the job listings on seek.com and plan on getting their forklift license and moving to another state, which is the kind of results that I got when I was looking for jobs as a photographer in the northern suburbs of Perth. Oh nice, a job I'm not qualified for, in Darwin. Well, that is technically north of this Perth CBD, so thanks, Seek. If only I was forklift certified and a registered nurse who could then also teleport. These search results that you give me would be super handy. Seek, you garbage website. The Resettlement Allowance was established in 2006 and has two amounts that it pays out based on how long someone has served. The full amount is for senators who have served longer than 3 years and members who have served more than a full term. They get paid the equivalent of 6 months of salary of a backbencher. A backbencher is just the default member of Parliament without like a ministry or leadership position. The salary of a backbencher gradually goes up over time, so the amount that was paid out to those who lost the 2022 election was $105,625. For any senator or member who served less than that amount of time, it's 3 months worth of salary, or $52,812.50 if you really want to be pedantic. Fun fact, if in rare cases someone fills a position for only just a few months, it's still the same amount, basically. Like Duncan Spender, who was a Liberal Democrat senator for New South Wales who filled a casual vacancy only 3 months before the 2019 election. There are similar payments, sometimes called transition payments, which, apply for state and territory parliaments, though as of this episode, New South Wales and Tasmania don't have them. Naturally, the details and the amount of money for those would vary from state to territory. Politicians can be excluded from this allowance for misconduct, but the term misconduct is not defined by the legislation, so we don't really have a precedent or example to show us what that would look like. So why does this exist? Well, there are a few reasons. Politicians don't get long service and recreational leave that could be cashed out upon leaving the position, unlike, other jobs. Another key reason why it was created was because anyone elected after 2004 is no longer eligible for the parliamentary pension. Which brings me to the next point. Most politicians won't get a pension. John Howard abolished that. He got rid of the parliamentary pension in 2004. I have a whole episode about that if you want to learn more, but basically, right, if you were elected after 2004, you simply just don't get a special parliamentary pension. You get a normal regular one like everyone else. However, it was grandfathered, which basically means it applies to anyone who was still eligible for it. So anyone who was elected before 2004, well, they can still get it. But simply being elected didn't guarantee you that pension. You needed to be in Parliament for at least 8 years. So it was actually quite possible for a member of the House of Representatives to serve 3 terms and still not be eligible for it. So how did it work? My sincerest apologies for what I'm going to say next. I'm going to be engaging in the only subject more boring than civics and citizenship: mathematics. I promise I'll be brief and you will not have to endure the horrors of numbers for longer than you need to. So, very quickly, if a member of Parliament served for 8 years, then their pension was 50% of their salary. It then grew by 2.5% for every year they served on top of that, maxing out at 75% after 18 years. There were other factors that would make it even larger, because different positions in Parliament get paid differently. So, a backbencher, down the bottom, is the base level. Shadow ministers and parliamentary secretaries get 25% more than a backbencher. Minor party leaders with more than 10 members get 45% increase. Deputy Leader of the Opposition gets 57.5% increase, whereas the Leader of the Opposition gets 85%, the Deputy Prime Minister gets 105% on top of a backbencher salary, and the Prime Minister gets a whopping 160% increase from the regular salary of a normal politician. So, Tony Abbott, who was in Parliament from 1994 to 2019, gets around $300,000 a year as a pension. Scott Morrison, on the other hand, was elected first in 2007. So if he doesn't retire but instead gets voted out from his electorate in the future, he's going to get somewhat over $100,000 as a one-off payment, just like a backbencher. He doesn't get a parliamentary pension. I mean, admittedly, former prime ministers do get a few benefits given to them by the incoming prime minister, like a driver, staff, an advisor, covering the costs of setting up an office, etc. I also, by the way, have an episode all about that if you want more detail, because I am a bountiful resource of knowledge who just is here to answer all your questions and wants to help you understand literally everything about Australian politics. But, like I said, not every former politician gets a pension. Stop thinking that. Only some of them do, and increasingly less do as the endless passage of time takes more and more former MPs into the ultimate lower house, the cemetery. So, what jobs do politicians tend to get afterwards, though? Well, there's no single answer to that. Members often will probably return to the careers that they had before, which are quite varied. Statistically, though, most members previously worked as, business managers, executives, political consultants, lobbyists, and lawyers, etc., with the numbers varying from parliament to parliament. In an episode of You Can't Ask That on the ABC, multiple ex-politicians discussed what it was like getting work after politics, and some of them said it was incredibly difficult, actually. Unsurprisingly, being a politician can turn a job application political, with the opinions and views of an employer contributing to whether or not they see an applicant with such a public profile as a good idea or not. Many receive tons of rejection letters as a result. Richard Evans, former member for Cowan in the 90s, said that he had to apply for unemployment benefits because he couldn't get a job for 4 years after politics. Evans commented, however, that others had played the game, so to speak, and so got promoted to ambassador or got to be on the board of a big company. And that does happen. Like, for example, Andrew Robb, who was the Minister for Trade and Investment under Abbott and Turnbull. He approved the lease of Port Darwin for 99 years to the Chinese company Shandong Land Bridge Group, only to be hired by them as a high-level economic consultant for $880,000 a year salary shortly before leaving Parliament and starting just days after the 2016 election. This kind of event is what's called the revolving door of politics. Basically, politicians have to make laws that regulate different industries, and this process involves discussions and meetings with people in that industry, including lobby groups. Remember how I said lobbyist was high up on the list of former careers for politicians? Well, it works the other way too, almost like it rotates. Like how doors normally don't, but sometimes do. Lobbyists are most effective when they can gain access to the people who have the decision-making power, and who can effectively get that access? Well, who better than a former Member of Parliament who knows how it all works? The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet has a list of registered lobbyists, which also says if someone on that list is a former government representative. As of this episode, that's 38% of the list. Now, there is a lobbying code of conduct, though, that a former minister can't lobby, advocate, or have business meetings with members of government, parliament, public service, or the defence force on any matters that they had official dealings with as a minister for at least 18 months. However, there's no actual specific penalties for breaching the lobbying code of conduct, and there are exceptions and a little bit of leeway, obviously. For example, Martin Ferguson was Minister for Resources and Energy under Rudd and Gillard for 5 years. He went on to accept a role as chairman of an advisory board of the gas and oil industry's peak body, the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association. That may seem close, but it's not quite the same. He was not found to have breached the code because he was just on the advisory board. He wasn't personally doing any lobbying. I'm not trying to insinuate that either he or Andrew Rubb broke this code of conduct. It's just that this is the kind of thing that, sparks discussions and news stories about politicians and their connections in the industry. And this is the kind of thing that happens enough that there is a name for it. Whether this is a good or a bad thing is not really my place to say. It's also important to note that there are 227 seats in federal parliament, so while there are many who go on to become diplomats, lobbyists, high-paid consultants, do a bunch of paid speeches at conferences, there's also a bunch that, get forgotten and fade away, or go back to doing exactly what they were doing before being elected. Some of them will have nice pensions for the rest of their lives, while others will go off with a one-off payment and do something, I guess. Like all things in politics, it's complicated and there is no single answer. Some former members go on to become authors, like Richard Evans, who I mentioned earlier, who has gone on to write multiple Australian political thrillers like Deceit, the first installment of the Democracy trilogy, which involves a corrupt prime minister, a plane crash that kills several key members of parliament, and the clerk of the parliament working with an investigative journalist to foil a conspiracy to defraud the government. Which sounds really interesting. I have not read it. I have no idea if it's good, but Australian political thriller is such an interesting sounding subgenre that I am kind of tempted to write my own. Who knows? Maybe in the future, I don't know. But that's it. That's the end of the episode. There you have it. Thank you so much for enjoying this episode. Comment down below what you would like to learn about next, share, subscribe, all those sorts of things. And join me on other social media platforms like Spotify, where you find podcasts. I have TikTok, like me on Facebook, I guess. And a massive thank you to all of those who support me on Patreon. Thank you for that. It is good. That's all for now, and I will see you next time.